Ever feel like you're just going through the motions? Day in, day out. Wake up, work, eat, sleep, repeat. Like the gears of a machine turning endlessly but going nowhere. It's a question many men face, staring into the mirror, wondering if this is all there is. Is this the legacy we're building? Ralph, a 48-year-old diesel mechanic, knew that feeling intimately. For 28 years, he'd wrestled with engines, his hands calloused and permanently stained with grease. He made $4,500 a month, enough to keep the lights on, but he was drowning in $50,500 of debt. He wasn't sure where he was headed, just that he was running as fast as he could and staying in the same spot. Ralph was not going to get ahead at this rate. His home, a small ranch house on the edge of the city, mirrored his own state, neat but dated, needing repairs he never had the energy to tackle. His relationship with his wife, Brenda, had settled into a comfortable silence, more like roommates than partners. His son, Kevin, lived 3 states away, successful in the corporate world, a world Ralph couldn't quite grasp. "How's the job, Dad?" Kevin would ask during their infrequent calls. "Same as always," Ralph would grunt, the words carrying the weight of unspoken regrets. He was trapped on a loop and had no way of escaping it. He'd given up on breaking out of the loop. He was stuck. Ralph's life had become a series of routines, a predictable cycle that offered comfort but no real satisfaction. He had no hobbies and only watched TV to fill the time. There was an emptiness in his eyes, a void where purpose used to be. His days began at 4:30 a.m., the house still dark and silent. Ralph would make coffee, the only sound the gurgle of the machine, and sit alone in the kitchen, staring out the window at the pre-dawn gray. By 5:30, he was on the road, the familiar route to the shop a blur of streetlights and sleeping houses. The work itself was rote, diagnosing problems, replacing parts, the endless grind of metal on metal. 28 years of it. Lunch was a stale sandwich eaten in the break room, surrounded by the same tired faces, the same conversations about sports and weather. The afternoon stretched on, each hour an echo of the last. By 5:00 p.m. his back ached, his hands were numb, and all he wanted was to go home. Evenings with Brenda were quiet. Dinner in front of the television, the news a constant drone of problems he couldn't fix. Sometimes he'd retreat to the garage, tinkering with an old Harley-Davidson Sportster he'd been slowly rebuilding for years. It was a distraction, a way to occupy his hands and quiet his mind. But even there, surrounded by the smell of oil and metal, he felt a sense of emptiness. He remembered a different life, a life of blueprints and calculations, of possibilities that stretched beyond the confines of the shop. At 19, he had been good with his hands, but he was good with his mind, too. He aced every standardized test. He remembered the day he received his scholarship to engineering school, the pride in his father's eyes. He thought he could change the world. Then Brenda got pregnant and the world changed him. He did what he thought was right, what was expected. He dropped out, got a job, married Brenda. He never regretted his son, Kevin, but he often wondered what might have been. "You okay, Ralph?" Brenda would ask, her voice laced with concern. "Fine," he'd reply, offering a smile. "Just tired." But it wasn't just tiredness. It was a deep-seated weariness of the soul. He felt like he was going through the motions, playing a role he no longer understood. His identity had become so intertwined with being a provider, a husband, a father, that he'd lost sight of who he was underneath. It had faded over the years. The breaking point came unexpectedly. While cleaning out the garage, he stumbled upon a dusty cardboard box. Inside, his old college textbooks, a slide ruler, and a notebook filled with his handwriting, a detailed business plan for Ralph's custom diesel, drafted 15 years ago. Seeing those faded words, the ambition he'd once held so fiercely, hit him like a punch to the gut. He was mourning a ghost, a man who never existed. He hadn't tried to exist. He opened the notebook. Inside were ideas, dreams, and calculations he'd forgotten he had. Reading his own words, a spark flickered, a faint ember in the ashes of his discontent. Could he still build something? Was it too late? Ralph woke at 4:30 a.m. The digital clock glowed a harsh red in the darkness. He swung his legs over the side of the bed, the familiar groan in his lower back a constant companion. Brenda stirred beside him, a soft sigh escaping her lips. He paused, watching her for a moment, then quietly slipped out of the room. Coffee, black, strong, the only ritual he consistently followed. He sat at the kitchen table, the pre-dawn silence broken only by the gurgling of the coffee maker. He stared out the window at the darkened street, the houses across the way identical to his own. A forgotten suburb, like him maybe. By 5:30 a.m. he was in his truck, a beat-up Ford F-150 with 200,000 miles on the odometer. The drive to the shop was a monotonous blur of highway and traffic lights, the same route he'd taken for nearly 3 decades. He thought about Kevin, his son, doing well in some corporate job 3 states away. He pictured Kevin in a suit and tie, navigating spreadsheets and conference calls, worlds away from the smell of diesel and the clang of wrenches. He felt a pang of pride, mixed with a bitter taste of regret. The shop was a cavernous metal building, the air thick with the smell of oil and exhaust. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting a sterile glow on the rows of trucks waiting to be fixed. Ralph clocked in at 6:00 a.m. sharp, $28.13 an hour, enough to keep the bills paid barely. He headed straight to his bay, a small, greasy corner that felt like his own personal prison. His first job, a semi with a blown turbocharger. He attacked the task with a practiced efficiency. Years of experience allowed him to diagnose the problem almost by instinct. His hands, broad and calloused, moved with precision, dismantling the engine, replacing parts. He lost himself in the work, the physical exertion a welcome distraction from the gnawing emptiness inside. Lunch was a lukewarm sandwich eaten standing up next to a rumbling engine. He scrolled through his phone, half listening to the shop radio blaring country music. Another bill reminder, $22,500 on maxed-out credit cards, $28,000 in medical debt. The heart scare had been a wake-up call, but also a financial burden. He shut off the phone with a sigh. He couldn't afford to be sick. The afternoon dragged on. More trucks, more problems, more grease. His back ached, his head throbbed. He was running on fumes. He caught himself staring blankly at a wrench, the weight of his years pressing down on him. He thought back to that business plan, Ralph's custom diesel. He saw himself in that vision, creating, building, solving problems with his own designs. He missed that Ralph. 5:00 p.m. Clock out. He drove home, the setting sun casting long shadows across the highway. The same drive, the same thoughts, the same weariness. He parked the truck in the driveway, the peeling paint on the house a mirror of his own decay. Brenda was already in front of the TV when he walked in the door. Dinner was Salisbury steak and mashed potatoes, heated up from a frozen package. They ate in silence, watching some mindless reality show. He felt a growing disconnect between them, a chasm of unspoken words and faded dreams. "Long day?" Brenda asked, not looking up from the screen. "Yeah," Ralph replied, his voice flat. "Long day." After dinner, he retreated to the garage, his sanctuary. He started tinkering with the 1985 Harley-Davidson Sportster he was rebuilding, a project he'd been working on for months. The feel of the cold steel in his hands, the smell of oil and gasoline, grounded him. At 9:30 p.m., he went back inside, showered, and crawled into bed. Brenda was already asleep, her breathing shallow and even. He lay awake for a long time, staring at the ceiling, the red numbers on the digital clock mocking him. He thought about the business plan again, the spark he'd felt reading his own words, the potential, the risk. He knew Brenda wouldn't understand. She was already too comfortable with his life. He drifted off to sleep, the image of a gleaming, custom-built diesel engine filling his dreams. Then the alarm went off. 4:30 a.m., time to do it all again. He shuffled through his routine, a ghost in his own life. Coffee, drive, work, the usual grind. But today, something felt different. He felt like he was suffocating, the weight of his choices pressing down on him. At lunch, instead of eating with the other mechanics, Ralph found a quiet corner in the shop. He pulled out a sandwich Brenda had made him, but he couldn't bring himself to eat it. He felt sick, his stomach churning with regret. He thought about Kevin, his son. He hadn't called him in weeks. Ralph knew he should reach out, but the words always felt hollow, like he was playing a part he didn't understand. The afternoon crawled by. Ralph wrestled with a stubborn fuel injector, his knuckles bruised and bleeding. Every wrench turn was a reminder of his physical decline, his failing body. He thought of his father, who had worked until he physically couldn't anymore. Was that going to be him? Just another cog in the machine, worn out and discarded. That evening, Ralph was cleaning out the garage. Brenda had asked him to get rid of some old junk. He hated throwing things away. Each item held a memory, a piece of his past. That's when he found it, a dusty cardboard box tucked away in the corner. He knew what it was before he even opened it. His college textbooks, his old business plan. He hesitated. For a moment, he considered ignoring it, pretending he hadn't seen it. He could just toss the box in the trash and go back inside, back to his comfortable routine. But something stopped him. A flicker of curiosity, a desperate yearning for something more. Ralph lifted the lid. The yellowed pages of the business plan stared back at him. Ralph's custom diesel. He remembered the hours he had spent writing it, fueled by ambition and dreams. He flipped through the pages, his fingers tracing the faded ink. Detailed sketches of custom engine designs, marketing strategies, financial projections. A life he could have had. A man he could have been. The man he should have been. He sat on an upturned bucket, his heart heavy. It was too late. 48 years old, overweight, in debt. He was a diesel mechanic, not a business owner. Ralph started to close the box, but a phrase caught his eye: innovation through craftsmanship. It was his own handwriting. He vaguely remembered writing it. He didn't remember what it meant, not at 19, not at 48. He spent all night reading his own words, a forgotten spark of ambition flickering to life within him. The clarity of his younger self's vision was unsettling. He saw the potential, the passion, the drive he had buried beneath decades of regret. It wasn't just about money. It was about legacy. It was about building something with his own hands, something that would outlast him. Brenda found him in the garage the next morning, unshaven, bleary-eyed, surrounded by textbooks and blueprints. She looked at him with a mixture of concern and confusion. "Ralph, what are you doing? You look like you haven't slept in days." He looked up, his face haggard but his eyes strangely alive. "I'm done, Brenda. I'm done being just a mechanic." "What are you talking about? That's what you are, Ralph. That's what you've always been." He stood up, his broad frame towering over her. "No, Brenda, that's what I did. That's what I settled for." He picked up the business plan, his hands trembling. "I was supposed to be more than this." Ralph looked around the garage. "We both were." Brenda sighed, the lines on her face deepening with weariness. "Ralph, don't start this again. You had your chance. That was a long time ago. We made our choices." "I made a choice, and then I stopped choosing. I just existed." Ralph swallowed hard, the lump in his throat threatening to choke him. "I can't do it anymore, Bren. I can't just keep turning wrenches until I die. I need to build something." Brenda stared at him, her expression unreadable. He didn't know if she understood. He didn't even know if he understood. But he knew one thing: he couldn't keep living this life. He had to try. He had to take a chance. Even if it meant losing everything. Even if it meant failing. At least he would fail on his own terms. He could feel it. The shift had come. Ralph was a man with a mission. The weight in Ralph's chest, the ache in his lower back, all the accumulated disappointments of 28 years as a diesel mechanic. It coalesced in that moment, solidified into a resolve he hadn't felt since he was a cocky 19-year-old walking away from his engineering scholarship. He saw Brenda's tired eyes, the resignation that mirrored his own for so long, and he knew he couldn't drag her down with him anymore. This wasn't about blaming her or their life together. This was about saving himself. He walked past her, out of the garage and into the pale morning light. The forgotten suburb looked even more bleak than usual. The peeling paint on his house, the patchy lawn, the silent, identical home stretching into the distance. It was a landscape of quiet desperation, a testament to dreams deferred. He was 48 years old, drowning in $50,500 of debt, and facing down the barrel of another 15 years in the same grease pit. Ralph thought of Kevin, his son. He had watched him walk across that stage, college degree in hand, and felt a surge of pride so intense it almost knocked him off his feet. But underneath the pride was a nagging feeling of inadequacy. Kevin had escaped. He had done what Ralph couldn't or wouldn't do. What kind of example had he set? The old business plan felt heavy in his hands. Ralph's Custom Diesel, a name that now seemed both arrogant and naive. He had envisioned a shop where he could not only fix engines but also design and build custom rigs, pushing the boundaries of diesel technology. It was more than just a job. It was an expression of his passion, a testament to his intelligence. He flipped open the notebook, the pages filled with sketches and calculations. The spark was still there. Faint, flickering, but undeniably present. He looked out at his neighborhood. He had to make a decision, keep living like this, or start building his legacy. "I am done living like this," Ralph whispered. He walked inside the house. "Brenda, I am going to the shop, need to clear my head. I'll see you later." The only thing that kept him at his current job was the insurance and a steady paycheck. He could figure this out. He was a mechanic. He could fix anything. The pre-dawn air hung heavy with the promise of another sweltering day as Ralph drove towards the shop. The familiar rumble of his old pickup, a workhorse like himself, filled the silence. Usually the drive was a mindless drone, a prelude to the predictable grind. But today, the old business plan felt like a weight in the passenger seat, a constant reminder of what could be. The highway stretched out before him, mirroring the long, uncertain road ahead. He arrived at the shop, the sprawling metal building already humming with the low thrum of activity. The smell of diesel and oil, usually a comfort, felt suffocating. He clocked in, nodding curtly at the other mechanics, their faces etched with the same weary resignation he saw every morning. His usual spot, bay number 4, was waiting, a hulking semi-truck already parked inside, its engine coughing like a dying beast. "Morning, Ralph," called out Jimmy, the new guy, his voice full of youthful enthusiasm that grated on Ralph's nerves. "Big job today, huh?" Ralph just grunted in response, grabbing his wrench and getting to work. As he wrestled with the stubborn engine, his mind drifted back to the business plan. Ralph's Custom Diesel. The name echoed in his head, a taunt and a promise. He remembered the hours he had poured into those pages, fueled by a burning desire to create something that was truly his. The business plan was detailed, from the financial projections to the marketing strategies, a full roadmap to his dream. He felt the resentment building. How had he let fear win? He found himself thinking about his father and the pride he took in his own shop. He remembers his father saying, "This is more than just a job, son. It's about fixing problems and building something that lasts." Ralph had walked away from all of that. And for what? A steady paycheck and a slow, quiet death of his soul. The familiar ache in his lower back flared, a physical manifestation of the emotional weight he was carrying. He straightened up, wiping the sweat from his brow with a greasy rag. He thought about Brenda, his wife. They were not enemies but lived in the same house in the same town. Their connection was a threadbare thing now, woven with the silence of shared history and unspoken regrets. What would she say if he told her he was thinking about leaving the job, using the last of their savings? He thought of Kevin. What would his son think? Would he see it as a midlife crisis, a foolish gamble? Or would he finally understand the man his father had always wanted to be? The thought of Kevin's potential disappointment was a sharp jab to the gut. He wanted to be more than just dad who fixes trucks. He wanted to show Kevin that it's never too late to chase your dreams. The sound of the wrench slipping jolted him back to the present. He stared at his scarred hand, the permanent grease stains etched into the lines of his palm. This was his life. This was his legacy, a life spent wrestling with stubborn machines, a legacy of grease and grime. But the spark had been rekindled. The spark was burning brighter now with his deep desire to prove he was more than the choice he made at 19. He could use all of his skills and knowledge. He could do it. That evening, after Brenda had gone to bed, Ralph quietly slipped into the garage. The Harley-Davidson Sportster, a half-finished project, sat under a tarp, a testament to his stalled ambitions. He pulled the tarp away, the chrome glinting under the single bare bulb. He didn't touch the bike. Instead, he opened the dusty box with his college textbooks and the business plan. He flipped through the pages, his fingers tracing the faded ink. He started making notes in the margins, updating the financials, sketching out new designs. The old passion returned, stronger now, tempered by years of experience. The road was long and uncertain, but for the first time in years, Ralph felt a flicker of hope. Ralph stared at the updated financials, numbers swimming under the dim garage light. $50,000 in debt, the underwater mortgage. He scratched his stubble, the sound rasping in the quiet garage. Retiring in 15 years felt like a cruel joke. He was a diesel mechanic for 28 years, 48 years old, but this felt like the only promise he'd ever make to himself. He wanted more. He closed the business plan, the weight of the decision pressing down on him. He knew Brenda wouldn't understand. She'd see it as another crazy idea, another distraction from the quiet life they had built, even if it was a life of quiet desperation. He could almost hear her voice, laced with worry, "Ralph, we have bills to pay." He'd seen her anxiety with money, and he needed to find a way to tell her. He loved her, but maybe not in the way she deserved. He picked up a greasy wrench, the familiar weight grounding him. His hands, broad and calloused, knew what to do. But the hands that could rebuild an engine felt powerless to fix the growing distance between him and Brenda. He thought of Kevin, 3 states away, building his own life, a life Ralph had helped make possible. Would his son see this as foolish? Or would he finally understand the man his father had always wanted to be? The thought of Kevin's potential disappointment was a sharp jab to the gut. He wanted to be more than just dad who fixes trucks. He wanted to show Kevin that it's never too late to chase your dreams. "It's time," he muttered, the sound barely audible above the hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. He wasn't sure if he was talking to himself or the ghost of his younger self, the kid with the engineering scholarship and the burning ambition. Ralph wanted to show his son there were still goals to reach, and he wanted to do it now. He wasn't getting any younger. He went back inside. Brenda was asleep, her face peaceful in the soft glow of the TV. He stood in the doorway for a long moment, watching her. Then he went into the spare room, pulled out a notepad, and began to write. Not a business plan, not yet, just a letter. A letter to Brenda, a letter to Kevin, a letter to himself. It was time to explain why, after 28 years, he needed to chase the ghost of his dream. As he wrote, the ache in his lower back eased slightly, replaced by a new feeling, a strange mix of terror and exhilarating possibility. Maybe, just maybe, he wasn't destined to die in the same grease pit. The first week was hell. Ralph, 48 years old and a diesel mechanic for 28 years, woke each morning before dawn, the letter still unfinished on his desk. The coffee tasted like ash. His back screamed in protest from the unfamiliar hours hunched over the business plan. He felt like an imposter, a kid playing dress-up in a suit that didn't fit. His usual routine at the shop offered some comfort. At least there he knew what to do. But even the familiar scent of oil and diesel couldn't mask the nagging doubts that clawed at the edge of his mind. Each day, Ralph considered quitting. He imagined throwing the tattered business plan into the trash, pretending the late-night writing sessions were just a bizarre dream. The debt loomed large, a constant reminder of his responsibilities. $50,500 owed, medical bills from the heart scare, credit cards maxed out. How could he even think about starting a business with that hanging over his head? It would be so much easier to just keep his head down, collect his $4,500 a month, and shuffle through the motions until retirement. His body ached. Years of wrestling with engines had taken their toll, and now the added stress of planning a new venture was like pouring gasoline on a slow burn. Sometimes, while lying in bed next to Brenda, he would feel a sharp pain in his chest, a phantom echo of the heart scare that made him clutch his chest and take slow, deep breaths. "You okay, Ralph?" Brenda would mumble, half asleep. "Just a cramp," he'd reply, turning away, not wanting to explain the real ache. He had made this choice. Now he had to finish it. Ralph's hidden strength, his almost uncanny ability to diagnose complex mechanical problems, kept him going. He saw patterns, solutions others missed. It was a gift he'd honed over decades, a quiet intelligence that had always been overshadowed by the grease and grime of his trade. Now, he applied that same methodical mind to the problem of his life. He broke down the business plan into manageable pieces, researched small business loans, and even dared to look at potential locations for Ralph's custom diesel. One evening, Kevin called. Ralph almost didn't answer, afraid his son would sense the turmoil brewing within him. "Hey, Dad," Kevin said, his voice bright and confident. "Just checking in. How's the Harley coming?" Ralph told him about the '85 Sportster he was rebuilding in the garage, trying to sound enthusiastic. "That's awesome, Dad," Kevin said. "You always were a wizard with engines." Ralph's heart swelled with pride, the compliment a lifeline in the sea of doubt. "Thanks, Kev," he managed to say, his voice thick with emotion. He wanted to tell Kevin about the shop, about the dream he was chasing, but the words caught in his throat. Not yet. Not until he was sure. His nights became a battleground. Dinner with Brenda in front of the TV, a comfortable silence that had become a tomb. Then, under the weak glow of a desk lamp in the spare room, Ralph would return to his business plan, the scent of old textbooks filling the air. He found himself rewriting sections he'd already finished, agonizing over every detail. He wondered what his dad would think. The old man had been a simple mechanic, content with fixing what was broken. Would he understand this need to build something new, something lasting? Ralph was determined to find out. "You're burning the candle at both ends, Ralph," Brenda said one morning, her voice laced with concern. He looked up from his coffee, his face pale and drawn. "I'm fine, Brenda," he said, his voice gruff. "Just got a lot on my mind." She didn't push, but he saw the worry in her eyes. He knew he had to tell her soon, had to explain why he was suddenly acting like a man possessed. But not yet. He needed to prove to himself that this wasn't just a midlife crisis, that this was something real. He needed to prove that at 48, a diesel mechanic could still build a legacy. He had made this choice, and he was going to chase the dream now. The scale, unforgiving, showed 252 pounds, 3 pounds gone. Ralph grunted, more surprised than pleased. He hadn't been actively trying to lose weight. The late-night study sessions, fueled by lukewarm coffee and nervous energy, were probably the culprit. He hadn't felt this driven since he was a teenager, poring over engineering textbooks instead of greasing gears. That felt like a lifetime ago. Now at 48, a diesel mechanic for 28 years, he was back in the books, only this time the stakes felt higher. Day 12 at the shop felt different. He wasn't just fixing problems, he was analyzing them. He saw inefficiencies, wasted movements, opportunities for improvement. The other mechanics noticed. "You got a bug up your butt today, Ralph?" asked Marcus, the new kid. Ralph just shrugged, but inside a quiet satisfaction bloomed. He wasn't just going through the motions anymore. He was seeing with new eyes. The scar above his eyebrow, a memento from a slipped wrench at 22, seemed to tingle with a faint energy. It was a constant reminder of a misstep, but also a symbol of learning, of paying attention. He started bringing a small notebook to work, jotting down ideas during his lunch break, streamlining the parts inventory, optimizing the workflow in the bay, even a rough sketch of a custom tool rack he envisioned. Small things, but each one a tangible step towards Ralph's custom diesel, the faded words from his old business plan now resurrected. That old plan was the skeleton. These were the muscles, the skin, the blood that would bring it to life. He had made this choice. Brenda noticed the change too. "You seem lighter," she said one evening, watching him tinker with the Harley in the garage. "Sleeping better," Ralph chuckled, the sound rusty from disuse. Not really, just busy. He didn't elaborate, but she saw something in his eyes she hadn't seen in years, a flicker of purpose, a spark of something alive. He wanted to tell her everything about the sleepless nights, the revived dream, the fear of failure, but the words still felt fragile, like a just-formed chrysalis. They needed time to harden, to take shape. Day 16, he secured a meeting with a business consultant, a friend of Kevin's he'd met at a family gathering. The consultant, a sharp young woman named Sarah, listened intently as Ralph laid out his plan. She asked pointed questions about market analysis, funding, competition. Ralph, armed with his years of experience and his meticulously revised business plan, answered with surprising confidence. Sarah's eyebrows rose. "This is impressive, Ralph," she said. "You've clearly done your homework." That night he finally told Brenda. After dinner, instead of turning on the TV, he led her to the spare room, the one he'd been avoiding for years. He opened the dusty box, pulled out the business plan, and laid it on the table. He watched her face as she read, a mixture of confusion, surprise, and then, slowly, dawning understanding. "Ralph," she said softly, her voice thick with emotion. "You always wanted this, didn't you?" He nodded, unable to speak. The weight of 29 years of unspoken dreams lifted from his shoulders. Day 21, he made the call. He called his old boss, Mr. Henderson, the owner of the chain he worked for. "I need to talk to you, Mr. Henderson," he said, his voice steady. "I'm putting in my notice." There was silence on the other end of the line. "Ralph, what's going on? You all right?" "I'm fine, Mr. Henderson," Ralph said. "I'm opening my own shop." He could practically hear the old man's jaw drop. "After all these years, you're sure about this, Ralph?" "Never been more sure," Ralph replied. The fear was still there, a cold knot in his stomach, but it was overshadowed by something else, a sense of exhilaration, a feeling of finally taking control of his own destiny. The next chapter of his life was being written. Day 30, 1 month in. Ralph caught his reflection in the chrome bumper of a Peterbilt. 48 years old, a diesel mechanic for 28 of them. He still saw the ghost of the boy who aced calculus, the one who dreamed of designing engines, not just fixing them. But something had shifted. The resignation was fading, replaced by a nervous energy he hadn't felt since he was a teenager. Brenda had started making his lunch again, packing it with a care she hadn't shown in years. Small things like a note tucked into his sandwich, "Good luck today, Ralph." It was a start. At dinner, she asked about the loan application, about the location he was eyeing on the edge of town. Real questions, not just polite nods. "Kevin called," she said one night after Ralph had been hunched over his laptop for hours. "He wants to know what's going on. Said you sounded different." Ralph grunted, a smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. He'd call Kevin tomorrow, tell him about Ralph's custom diesel. Mr. Henderson hadn't taken the news well. "Ralph, you're making a mistake," he'd said, his voice laced with disbelief. "You've got it good here, steady paycheck, benefits. What are you going to do, start all over again at your age?" Ralph had simply repeated, "I'm opening my own shop, Mr. Henderson." The old man's jaw clicked shut. "Well," he finally said, "don't come crawling back when you fail." Ralph didn't flinch. The guys at the shop noticed too. He was sharper, more focused, diagnosing problems faster, offering solutions with a quiet confidence that bordered on arrogance. "What's gotten into you, Ralph?" asked Danny, the youngest mechanic. Ralph just shrugged, the thin, white scar above his right eyebrow a silent testament to years of hard work and hidden dreams. He saw the fear in Danny's eyes. Fear of being stuck in the same place, doing the same thing, until the grease stained his soul. He almost told him about the business plan, about the spark that had been rekindled, but he held back. Not yet. He spent his lunch break sketching designs for his shop, a blend of modern efficiency and old-school grit. He envisioned a place where innovation met craftsmanship, where young mechanics learned from the old guard, where every engine was a work of art. The fear was still there, lurking in the shadows, whispering doubts. But now it had a counterweight, a stubborn refusal to let his dream die, to fade into the background. Ralph was building his legacy, one wrench turn at a time. Routine settled in, a new kind of rhythm. 4:30 a.m. still came too early, but now Ralph wasn't just shuffling to the coffee pot. He was thinking, planning, calculating. He'd spend an hour before work poring over blueprints he'd found online for shop layouts, adapting them to fit the vision in his head. Brenda noticed. "You're up earlier than usual," she said one morning, her voice still thick with sleep. Ralph just grunted and took another sip of coffee. He wasn't ready to share yet. Fear of jinxing it, maybe. Or fear of her looking at him with that pitying, familiar kindness that felt like a betrayal. He found himself staying late in the garage, not just tinkering with the Harley but welding practice joints, perfecting his technique. The rhythmic clang of the hammer against steel was a welcome distraction from the buzzing anxiety in his head. He remembered his dad, sweat-stained and focused, teaching him to weld when he was just a kid. "Clean metal, steady hand, son," he'd say. "That's all there is to it." Ralph smiled, the corner of his mouth twitching for the first time in months. It was more than that. It was about control, about creating something strong and lasting from raw materials. Ralph started hitting the library on his lunch breaks, devouring books on small business management and marketing. He even swallowed his pride and signed up for an online course on digital advertising. Kevin would have laughed. His son, the marketing executive, making six figures pushing data around on a screen. But Ralph didn't care. He needed to understand this new world if he was going to make Ralph's custom diesel a reality. He imagined Kevin walking through the shop, seeing what he'd built, finally understanding why his dad had always smelled like diesel and metal. One evening, while Brenda was engrossed in her favorite true crime show, Ralph quietly slipped out to the garage. He flipped on the fluorescent lights and stared at the half-finished Harley. It wasn't just a hobby anymore. It was a symbol, a reminder of the passion he thought he'd lost. He grabbed his welding helmet, the familiar weight settling comfortably on his head. He fired up the torch, the blue flame spitting to life. He lowered his mask and began to weld, the sparks flying, each one a tiny burst of hope illuminating the darkness. He felt the heat on his face, the familiar smell of burning metal filling his nostrils. He was building something real, something his own. The ache in his lower back seemed to ease, replaced by a different kind of weariness, the satisfying exhaustion of a day spent creating. He knew it wouldn't be easy. $50,500 debt, underwater mortgage. And Henderson's words echoed in his head, "Don't come crawling back." But Ralph wasn't crawling, he was building. He saw it now, the rough outline of his future, not as a forgotten suburb, but as a bustling workshop, filled with the roar of engines and the clang of tools. A place where his name meant something more than just a paycheck. He just needed to figure out how to get there. And for the first time in a long time, Ralph felt like he had a plan. The next morning, Ralph, 48-year-old diesel mechanic, arrived at Henderson Diesel a little earlier than usual. He walked with a new resolve, a slight straightening of his stooped posture. The ache in his back was still there, a dull throb, but it didn't feel quite so heavy today. He clocked in, grabbed his tools, and headed to his bay. He had a Peterbilt with a misfiring cylinder to diagnose, a problem that would frustrate most mechanics. But Ralph saw it as a puzzle, a chance to exercise the knowledge he'd honed over 28 years. The ghost of that abandoned engineering degree flickered in his mind, but today, it didn't sting quite as much. He spent the morning wrestling with the big rig, tracing wires, checking fuel lines, listening to the engine's rhythm with a practiced ear. Henderson, the shop foreman, a man Ralph had known for almost 20 years, watched him from across the shop. He'd seen Ralph go through the motions for years, the quiet, reliable workhorse of the team. But today, there was something different in the way he moved, a focused intensity that Henderson hadn't seen in a long time. "Something got into you, Ralph?" Henderson finally asked, sauntering over to his bay. Ralph looked up, wiped his hands on a rag, and gave a rare, almost imperceptible smile. "Just trying to fix this damn Peterbilt, Henderson." Henderson chuckled. "Yeah, well, you always were good at that. Just seemed like you were enjoying it for once." Ralph shrugged, turning back to the engine. "Maybe I am." He tightened a bolt, the click of the wrench echoing in the shop. He liked the smell of diesel, liked the challenge of it. What he didn't like was the paycheck-to-paycheck existence. He still owed $50,500, a mountain of debt threatening to crush him. But today, the mountain seemed a little smaller. Later that afternoon, Henderson called Ralph into his office. "Got a proposal for you, Ralph. Big client, fleet of Mack trucks. Needs a head mechanic, someone reliable, someone who knows diesels inside and out. Pays more, comes with some benefits." Ralph leaned back in the creaky chair, the vinyl sticking to his sweat-soaked shirt. He knew what Henderson was offering: a promotion, a raise, more security. The kind of security he thought he wanted. "What's the catch, Henderson?" he asked, his voice low and gravelly. "No catch, just think you deserve it. You've been here longer than anyone, and frankly, you're the best damn mechanic we got." Ralph paused, considering. The extra money would help with the medical bills, maybe even put a dent in those maxed-out credit cards. Brenda would be happy. Kevin wouldn't have to worry so much. But it would also mean more responsibility, more hours, more of the same routine that had been slowly suffocating him for years. He looked out the window, at the forgotten suburb where his small ranch house sat, its peeling paint a mirror to his own fading dreams. "I appreciate it, Henderson," Ralph said, finally turning back, "but I'm gonna have to pass." Henderson's eyebrows shot up. "Pass? Ralph, this is a good opportunity. What else are you gonna do at 48? Ralph stood up, the chair scraping against the floor. He looked Henderson in the eye, a spark of something he hadn't seen in years. "I'm gonna build something, Henderson, something that's mine." He walked out of the office, leaving Henderson speechless. The shop floor awaited. The smell of oil,